The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, Season 2, a podcast where we talk about literature, the ins and outs of writing, and how to actually start writing.
Hey everyone, this is Tete DePunk, one of the co-hosts of the Nuts and Bolts of Writing. On this episode, my co-host R.N. Roveleh and I review the recent cinematic blockbuster, Christopher Nolan's biopic Oppenheimer. Today we'll be exploring the stunning impact and how it's revitalized cinema.
And what a wonderful experience it was. I've just returned from watching Oppenheimer in IMAX, and I'm more than excited to discuss it with you. So let's get to it. Why did you want to watch this movie?
Oh my gosh. Well, I had heard about it a few months ago, and I thought it would be just sort of a run-of-the-mill, sort of hyped up blockbuster that might be a disappointment. So I didn't really pay attention to it. I was a little intrigued. It was about Oppenheimer. This particular event and figure had always fascinated me, but I studied the event and the consequence, but I never studied about the man himself or the people involved in it because it was a joint collective effort. And this mainly stemmed from an ironic place. I was into opera about over a decade ago. I still enjoy opera, but I'm no longer a devoted fanatic of it. I'm sort of a nostalgic person where I just like past productions and things like that. But there was one opera by American composer John Adams, aptly named Dr. Atomic, and it dealt with Oppenheimer's moral crisis and the Trinity test conducted on Los Alamos. And that opera definitely resonated with me because I had seen on PBS the simulcast of when the Metropolitan Opera in New York used to do live performances at the Met, and they would record it and simulcast it into theaters, and these would later be released on PBS. And I had gotten to see Dr. Atomic on PBS, and it really blew my mind. I loved it. One of the moments of which is probably one of the best baritone arias in operatic history is "Batter My Heart." It left a very profound impact on me. But as I said, I didn't really delve into the man himself or the figures. I knew some of the names and what they did and and I think for me, what really resonated with me was the consequences of these actions. But as Oppenheimer, the closer to the release date, and I saw the memes with the whole Barbenheimer shenanigans, I became intrigued. I began to realize that maybe there is something to this movie. It was a slow dawning, and I realized it's going to be let's just say a striking cinematic experience, and it delivered. It really, in fact, it maybe went beyond my expectations. It was just so beautifully and heavily put together. And also too, for a very, very long time, I mean, ever since I enjoyed like 30s comics and pulp fiction and stuff like that, um, I've always enjoyed the idea of science and scientists and the moral crisis that follow of that, because I've always been opposed to the whole mad scientist trope. I've always strongly disliked it, and I've always been intrigued by the moral crisis that one could possibly face when involved in the politics of where you live, and the fact that sadly a lot of science is connected to political funding, and you're left with a powerless juggernaut. And I've always been intrigued by that. So I do want to say that maybe probably Adam's opera sparked more of that than say comics and such, because I never liked how comics depicted science, or even some examples in other media. But and this was also timely because I for the past couple months have been trying to put together a work that involves the moral crises of scientists during a tense political time. So Oppenheimer was the most personalized best thing that happened. So that's why I wanted to see this movie, and boy did it deliver.
I see. So it more the theme that drew you to it. To me, it was quite different because I really love Christopher Nolan's movies in general. Interstellar is one of the best movies I've seen, and I've loved Inception, The Dark Knight, Dunkirk. So both his sci-fis and his realist movies like Dunkirk. So Oppenheimer was going to be somewhere between. And I hold Nolan in very high regard, and also I have great expectations from him. And given that the cinematic scene has been quite dry lately. I was really excited to go to a movie where I knew that the director put a lot of effort and a lot of artistry into its making. So I went with really high expectations. But at the same time, or especially because of that, I did not want to know anything about the movie. I didn't even look at the poster before it. So this is the extent to which I went so as not to get any spoilers, because I really believe in forming my own opinions about something and not being biased in any way, and not having my attention drawn to something in particular. I just want to understand things as they are shown in the movie, as the director intended to show to them, especially when it's about a very artistic movie like those of Christopher Nolan. So yes, this is why I went to Oppenheimer. So what did you like about this movie?
Well, just to kind of like bounce off what you said, you're absolutely right. I think Nolan has really, really surpassed himself. Like, he's reached the pinnacle of his art, and he's brought to us a very profound experience. And also too, it's refreshing because we have lived in a very terrible desert of cinema. It's just been a desert of franchise after franchise, and just so bogged down by CGI, action pack fest, that action kind of means nothing now. We've been desensitized to action. So the fact that Oppenheimer didn't rely on action, but the human psyche, was refreshing. And that kind of ties into the next question. What I loved about this movie was it it understood storytelling, but at the same time it was so natural. It did not feel like a gimmicky movie. It did not feel like it was trying to pull fast punches. It did not feel like it was trying to, like, pull any modern tropes that we've associated with the run-of-the-mill cinema today. It really immersed us into the perspective of not only Oppenheimer, but, for example, I think the strongest points of this movie were with the Los Alamos and the Trinity test. You felt so immersed that you felt like one of the scientists in the team, and you felt invested in seeing the success of that bomb go off. And it was kind of a terrifying experience, because it's like, what this bomb's capable of, yet you've seen all the hard work and sacrifices that the scientific team has made, but you still want it to succeed. So you're holding your breath and you're hoping it ignites, and you're there with the science. You almost want to like hold up a welder's glass to your eyes. And I remember one point in the movie, I probably got the names wrong because my mind's still reeling from the awesomeness of it. One of the scientists, Hans Bethe, he's just walking around like, put on your welder's glasses. I'm like, put them on. And I was yelling it in the theater, put them on, because that explosion's going to go off, and then you're going to get your retinas burned, and you'll be blind, or maybe permanently blind. Because we don't know how blind, because like usually you wear welder's glasses to prevent blindness from arc flashes. So, I mean, who knows how this is going to blind you? So I'm like, put on your welder's glass. And I was yelling that in the theater, But yeah, this is that was one of that. But yes, this is what I liked about this movie, and it was honest, and it dealt too with political strife and conflict, and kind of uh, an agonizing trial for Oppenheimer. He's very much stripped and violated of his past connections, of which, you know, this man he had convictions, he had beliefs, and he wasn't afraid to voice them despite the naysaying of others. And sadly, it costed him because, just to aptly put it, how do I say it's how do I say it? It's like the focus of the Red Scare truly punctuates how perilous conviction can be against political conformity. And it's also shown too, power runs in the courses of the inevitable. Few have the power, and it's a bit like the quote from Strauss: power, remains in the shadows, and no one really has the power to stop the gravitational pull of politics and humanity.
That's really, really well said. I agree. I agree. Right. I know what you mean. These are some of the things that I really loved about it as well. I love the seriousness of it, the gravitas the theme deserves, and with which Nolan treated it. I love that it doesn't sensationalize it, neither the work that Oppenheimer does, nor his personal life. There isn't any unnecessary drama or tear-wrenching scenes, but instead it is tasteful, it's realistic, it's matter of fact, but also very artistically depicted. I love the cinematography, mainly those surreal juxtapositions between Oppenheimer's reality and his stream of consciousness, of the tremendous power of the sun and of the dying stars, and later on, once the bomb goes off, of the terrifying force that he has unleashed. I don't want to go into a lot of detail just to spell it out in case some of our viewers haven't watched it yet, but you know what I mean. And that, I think, those juxtapositions were an excellent way to show not only his passion and dedication, or later his dread and guilt, but also to show how beyond our struggles and limited understanding, there are powers that we can never fully comprehend or control, and that there is danger in thinking that you can control them, because I think that this is what the movie was essentially about. And the way that Nolan showed those things, uh, I think made the movie more than just a biopic. Yes, it was realistic, but it also had another dimension. That was the way in which you understand the power of it all. So that was beautiful and powerful, and also inspiring awe, as as it should be given the theme. And also I love that it's very bold, and it tackled a topic that isn't often discussed, and that is the atomic bomb, and the fact that it took so many lives, and it was a very conscious decision that people took on, that the politicians took on, to take so many lives. Yes, it was war, but those were civilians that died, and the ease with which that was taken, it's still mind-blowing to think that that happened. And yet we see it not in a way that it's uh, judgmental of the way in which it happened, because there was a context to it, but we see it from the point of view of the scientist, who had a very different relation to it, right? Because we see his um, fascination with it as a theory, because Oppenheimer was a theorist first and foremost, and his ambition to solve the problem. And once he does, it gradually falls out of his hands, and it starts to take on a life of its own, in a way, because once he's done the tests, and once his superiors are shown that everything uh, works and that it's feasible, this is when Oppenheimer completely lost control of it. And I think that was really bold to show it.
It was such a reverberating experience. And I think too, like you said, it's it's the kind of callousness you see with politics and government. I mean, they're even like discussing drop points for the bomb, and they kind of joke about it, which it it's so heartless, you know what I mean? But it's sadly the true face of war. That's
Exactly.
it's the power hold, and I remember an interview with the actual Oppenheimer, and he's talking about how in the 20s and 30s, after people learn it, you would hope people would have learned their lesson after the Great War, which is what World War I was called. And you think people would learn that lesson and try to go higher beyond that kind of barbarity. And you think something like this will instill enough fear that people will not use it. But instead it's altered our modern world. And now so many countries already have this, and it just takes the push of a button, and you know what I mean? We have cradled it's like our foot is on a precipice, and if we take one wrong step or 1 inch further, the stone crumbles and we fall into the abyss, and there's no way back, just because of our modern ascension. And it it's a damning, indictment, but at the same time it's an agonizing look into such torment experienced, and also the consequences of having having conviction. If you don't conform to the heartlessness of politics, you will be singled out. I feel like a lot of these themes kind of embodied the well-known lyrics of the song by MT Little Dark Age. And I know it's been used a lot for memes and videos and edits, but the lyrics strike very true. Um, but I guess to get back onto course, what you have said just is absolutely right of the movie. It really does. It's something that I think some movies have kind of glossed over, especially like in the Western sphere, so to speak, with a point of view on that.
Right, exactly. So I think that the political and moral themes were very tastefully and profoundly conveyed throughout the movie.
Yes, they were. Absolutely. They were.
So, what did you not like about this movie?
So, I feel like so with every film there has to be a Persian flaw. And I think any work, whether it's a movie, a book, a story, any kind of work, an artwork, any kind of art, there always has to be a Persian flaw. And I think the only Persian flaw I can see here, um, probably maybe the relationship with Jean Tatlock. I mean, I feel like on one hand it was kind of necessary to understand, his personality per se, and the impact that she imparted to him. But at the same time, it just felt a little tacked on to me. I think if I try to imagine the movie without her, um probably it would have seemed maybe a little bit dry for most audiences. I would have been fine without it. um and then I think the only other thing maybe I didn't like, um probably the wide panning shots. I mean, it's like I enjoy panoramic shots, but I feel like the real power is in the intimate shots, because you want to get uncomfortably close. You want to get so close that you see their eyelashes and skin pores, and it's like you really delve into the eyes of their psyche, and you see that mental landscape uh form before you within that person as they're experiencing something, or who they're questioning who they are. So I think for me that was that's probably the only flaws that I found in the movie that aren't really big flaws. They can stay, the movie's still wonderfully strong. But if we were to remove or edit them, it would be I wouldn't mind it at all. Like it would just be more serious and more like punch me in the face.
I see what you mean. Yeah. I guess for me as well, it's not a flaw, but something that I would like to see more of. Um, like I said in the beginning, I loved those surreal scenes, and I wish there was more of that. It's definitely not a criticism at all, because if there was more of that, it would be a different type of movie. It would be maybe, I don't know, another Interstellar, because those parts were the parts that really reminded me of Interstellar. So of course, when I went to see a biopic about one of the gravest moments in history, I knew I would see something sober and realistic. And So it's not a criticism that there wasn't more of that. And also, very importantly, if there was more of that, that would change the main character's personality, because Oppenheimer isn't a dreamer. Yes, he's a theorist, but he isn't that head in the clouds scientist who's always dreaming about the objects of his study, like you said. He's not the stereotypical scientist at all. So of course, those I don't think I think that would have shifted the emphasis. But for me personally, I enjoyed more of that, because that would show more of into his I guess stream of consciousness, rather than politics as it was. I did enjoy the politics, but if I had made it, I would have made less of the politics and more of the, I guess, personal scenes with showing his thoughts, rather than
Yeah.
all the
The
discussions. But
Yeah.
that's not criticism, because this is the type of movie that it was, and I enjoyed it as it was. um how did you find the cinematic score?
Oh, the score. That was one of the main things that drew me to see it. I felt drawn. I was like, Paul on the road to Damascus. I So when I first had seen people like putting snippets of the score online, especially the reoccurring theme of Oppenheimer, that's when like you feel that that
Yeah.
it just struck me, and hearing it in theater, it did it so much justice. I Unfortunately, my local cinema is kind of your standard run-of-the-mill outdated place in a small town, so I didn't get to enjoy it in IMAX with booming stereo, which I really wish I could have, because I would have loved to have heard it shaking the rib cages of my heart. Um, but but uh but the theme, the score itself, especially Ludwig's Göransson's score was just so rich. It had this beautiful loop. It reminded me of the circular motions of a turbine, or the symbolic nucleus we often associate the atom with. And it's like one person on YouTube, a lot of the science crowd loved this movie, so I was happy to see that. They said it reminded them of snapping synapses going off in the brain, and they loved the score. They said it sounded like a scientist's lament, both
Wow.
modern yet drawn out and poignant. And it was tastefully done with its simplicity and lightness, with tinges of electrical in it, just to evoke the modern century. And I love the score. I can't get enough of this score. I actually listen to like pieces on it on repeat, like especially like ones like not only the Oppenheimer theme, which it's dubbed, but I guess what it's more accurately known as Can You Hear the Music and Destroyer of Worlds, which is just a revisit of Can You Hear the Music, but it's so much darker and devastating, you know?
Yeah, that was really beautifully described, and that's true. And I can't wait to listen to the score again. I did watch the movie in IMAX, and I do not regret
Oh,
traveling for this one bit because it was beautiful. And uh, wow, those were some really powerful scenes. You know, the key scenes of the movie where the where with the bomb, right? And it was amazing to watch that scene and to really hear the rich sound and the sound effects, not only the music as well. And yes, it was beautiful. So how did you think the visual imagery and sound design work in the movie?
so the visual imagery and sound design worked in the movie. It was such a beautiful union. It it really shows what happens when you can make that wedding wed together of visual imagery and sound, and they work hand in hand, like whether it's the pounding in the auditorium of a crowd stomping its feet, mimicking like the sonic boom of a bomb's dissension, or whether it's the silent intervals of that are punctuated by the sharp sounds of the violin. And I like what Gernanson said, that he wanted to represent Oppenheimer through the violin because it's a threatless instrument. But then once you change the vibrato on it or anything, it suddenly becomes erratic and maniac, and then it gets lost into the pulling drive of the orchestra. And you see that, like especially like the last motion, the last movement of Can You Hear the Music or Destroyer of the Worlds. It's beautifully put together. Um, and I also like too the more subtle scenes, such as Kitty taking down the sheets, and you just feel this striking silence and solitude of the New Mexican desert, and she's taking down the sheets, and it just it feels so realistic. Like we've all done laundry, we all hang it out, and we know what it's like just to stare at something and not think anything of it. And little do you know that you're you're going to witness the change of the world, its destruction, so to speak. And it was beautifully done. I feel like I'll let you take this because you have a very wonderful appreciation for it. What did you think of the scientific imagery and how that corresponded with the music, especially the theme?
I think that was really beautifully done. And like you said about the sound, I really love the moments of silence. I generally love silence in movies, and I'm fascinated with the idea of silence in writing as well. I really love those moments, and I think that the way that the sound um, the alternates with silence is really powerful and really beautifully done in the movie. And I loved um, uh, those amazing images of symbolizing the atomic bomb, right, and the power that it represents. So I think those were really the highlights of the movie for me, and I like how the science is handled. That you get a lot of information, enough to really feel the gravity of what is happening, but it doesn't turn into a lesson or a documentary, mainly through the visuals. And I really liked how that was handled.
I think that was, you're absolutely right. It was handled perfectly. And, you know, one thing that kind of ties into a previous question, I think if I would have written it just like you would have changed some things, I guess for me, I would have changed more of the exploration of that science, you know, as someone who's fascinated by it, and I have no mathematical comprehension whatsoever. I once did good at math, but I mean algebra. But anyway, I would have loved to have seen more scientific exploration, and um, that would be one thing I would change. And I think we have a few more questions to go down, I think.
Right. So first, I wanted to ask you, what scenes packed the most impact in the movie?
So I would say that the scenes that had the most impact would probably be, I think for me, well, it was first is when he's a young student and his exploration of discovering quantum physics and conceptualizing it. That had serious impact. I think the other ones that had the most impact were probably the intense and, you know, almost painfully degrading interrogations put forth by this pretty much illegal board. And, you know, one scene is where he's kind of shown as, maybe not spoiler alert, I won't describe the whole scene, where he's kind of shown as almost naked before these men. And it's a symbolic, you know, violation. And that scene itself had impact, and just the sheer malicious malice of particular the one prosecutor, I think Roger Robb it was, just the pure malice emanating from that man. I hated him, and I was in the theater and I called him a weasel. I actually called him a stronger name, but I had to keep myself quiet because everyone's saying shh. It's like, and I was like yelling, you know, and it just got me so stirred. And I think the black and white IMAX shots were beautifully done because it evokes memory. And then last but not least, the whole thing at Los Alamos is beautifully done. Um, and you know, also the final scene with the, I don't know, there's a final scene, I won't say what happened, but it ends with such simplicity that it is profound and so sobering.
Yes, yes, I completely agree, and you named some of my favorite scenes as well. So yes, I loved, like I mentioned, the ones with his. I guess I could call it the stream of consciousness, right? I love those that juxtapose between the powerful imagery that's going on in his head versus what is actually going on around him. So those were definitely my favorite. And I love the ones with Einstein and the one with President Truman. That was really powerful.
It was
And
so
uh,
scary. It made me hate
I
him so
know,
much
and it
more.
was amazing to watch that and to know that he actually said those things and he actually did those things. So that's historically accurate, and it was I really liked how it was shown in the movie. It was scary as it should be. And right, those were great images, and you're not even going into the spoiler ones and the ones that pack the most punch, because that would be spoiling for the audience who hasn't seen it yet. But
True.
what do you think about something that has been discussed online, and that is the sex scene, the one with Jean
Uh,
Tatlock?
oh God, I gotta
Uh,
go into this. I mean,
did
do you want to give your voice first, or do you want me to go ahead?
um yeah, sure. I want to go first because I heard that it was controversial, but I didn't really understand exactly why. I mean, I know that I know what people say about it, but I did not think it was redundant at all. And I don't I okay, I don't find sexuality and nudity to be offensive. So, as I understand it, a lot of people were offended by that. I know that there can be redundant scenes, and I have seen plenty of them in movies. And I know when something is redundant, but here I think that it showed the connection between them and the fact that they were reading a book together, and it was something that was very inspirational for Oppenheimer. I think it was actually very impactful because he was in a vulnerable moment, right? He was in a moment of intimacy when he was open to feeling, and the fact that this is the moment when he quotes that line, I think that it made the sex scene more powerful, and it also fit with the emotional state that he was in at the moment. So no, I did not find it redundant. And the nudity, well, this is how people have sex, and it's an R-rated movie.
It is an
So I
R-rated
really
movie.
don't understand why someone would
Oh,
be offended by that.
yeah. I mean, I think for me, I mean, I kind of understand it. I mean, for me, the quote is quite important. You know, I am become death, destroyer of worlds. It's basically a very loose and a loose form paraphrasing of the 11th chapter, 34th verse, 32 verse, I think, of the Bhagavad Gita. I probably mispronounced it, so any speakers, please correct me. Um, but basically, it's a text that he quoted on a news interview, which has echoed in, you know, timeless infamy. And it has such a different context because, you know, for me, what that symbolizes is that it's done in the plural. You know, he's referencing himself in the plural. He's describing Los Alamos as a plural thing. Like, yes, he is the leader, but this was a collective effort of everyone, like the scientists, like Teller, Beta, you know, even a little bit of touch of Bohr there. Niels Bohr, by the way, not that it was boring. um,
Yeah.
but you know, science is not a solitary venture. It's one formed of a team, united or not in ideology or even concept or solution. And he refers it as we. It's an orchestration of many agents, dizzying mix of conflict and unison. But basically, it also, the whole verse of this relates to the fact that it shows the inevitability of destruction, and that we're all in this juggernaut of orchestrating our destruction. Because in this scene, you know, Arjun is pretty much forced or compelled by Vishnu, and the original translation is a little bit different. It goes, and this is a translation I have. You know, it says, I am time grown old, creating world destruction, set in motion to annihilate worlds. Even without you, all these hostile warriors arrayed in hostile ranks will cease to exist. And that's pretty much a sort of a realistic parallel with what the atom bomb and the atomic age birthed. You know, this thing of where it doesn't matter if you're here, the effects of what you did will live on, and you have no power over what you have unleashed. And it's inevitable. So this is what the quote means. The quote means a lot to me. For me, the sex scene, I wasn't a big fan of it. I wanted to see more of maybe like conflicts of science or something, maybe more some political stuff, but I'm okay with it. Like you said, it showed a lot of his personality and vulnerability. But overall, I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm okay with it. I probably would have loved to have seen Nolan recreated in black and white IMAX shots, that infamous interview. And I would have loved to have seen Oppenheimer, you know, give interviews in the movie and see, you know, Cillian Murphy try to recreate that dead, hollow look that the actual Oppenheimer had in his eyes, that were just like hollowed out voids of dead despair. But that's my take on it. But overall, it was a beautiful, beautiful, profound movie. It was an experience, and it really reverberated in me. It certainly did batter my heart, you know.
I know, and it's the same for me. It was a wonderful movie and experience. Thank you so much, Tete, for your analysis. It was excellent, and it was a pleasure to remember the movie with you.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to work with you, and this was a wonderful experience to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.